real question isn't whether you're training, it's what you're training yourself for. The life you end up living usually isn't random. It's built from small things you do over and over until they just become part of who you are. Your habits aren't neutral. They aren't meaningless little actions that disappear. They're training you. Every repeated action teaches your mind and nervous system what's normal, how much effort you expect from yourself, how much pressure you'll tolerate, how much responsibility you're willing to carry. Do something long enough, and it stops feeling like a decision. It just feels like you. What seems harmless today can easily become your new standard tomorrow. You skip something small. You put off a hard conversation. You cut a corner because it doesn't seem like a big deal. In the moment, it feels minor. But when you repeat it, it becomes familiar. Familiar turns into comfortable, and comfortable slowly turns into identity. Avoiding things doesn't stay isolated. It builds a pattern. Every time you back away from something difficult, you teach yourself that difficulty is dangerous. Every time you delay effort, you reinforce the idea that effort is optional. Over time, your nervous system adjusts to that lower demand. It starts expecting things to be easy. Pressure feels uncomfortable faster. Things that used to be manageable now feel overwhelming. The opposite is also true. Discipline expands you. When you show up, even when it's uncomfortable, when you finish what you start, when you take on something you'd rather avoid, you're giving yourself a different message. You're teaching yourself that discomfort won't destroy you. That responsibility won't crush you. That pressure is something you can handle. Your nervous system adapts to the level of challenge you regularly accept. If you take on small challenges consistently, you build capacity for bigger ones. If you turn down even small challenges, your tolerance shrinks. It's like a muscle. Use it, and it grows. Ignore it, and it weakens. Your body doesn't argue about this. It just responds. Your mind works the same way. The shortcuts you take every day usually aren't dramatic. They're subtle. They sound practical. You tell yourself it's just for today. You promise you'll make up for it tomorrow. But your body and mind don't respond to promises about tomorrow. They respond to what you actually did today. They track patterns, not intentions. If you regularly choose the easier option, you're practicing for a smaller stage. You're training yourself to expect less from yourself. You're lowering your tolerance without realizing it. And tolerance matters. It determines what you can handle without falling apart. It determines what opportunities you can step into without panicking. Responsibility, pressure, growth. You don't suddenly rise to them in one big heroic moment. You grow into them over time. Someone who's only practiced handling small responsibilities will feel crushed by large ones, not because they lack potential, but because they've been training at a lower level. This quiet training happens in normal, everyday moments. When you wake up and decide whether to get up or stay in bed. When you face a task and decide to start now or push it off. When you feel resistance and decide whether to lean in or back away. These choices seem small, but they add up. Every choice is a vote. Every repetition teaches you something. Over time, those lessons turn into character. Character shapes your capacity. Capacity shapes your opportunities. If your daily patterns train you to avoid strain, dodge responsibility, and soften your standards, it shouldn't surprise you when life hands you smaller roles. There isn't really neutral ground. You're either building capacity or losing it. You're either strengthening resilience or rehearsing retreat. This training doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel dramatic. It just keeps repeating quietly until it becomes who you are. Most people don't consciously choose a smaller life. They practice their way into it. They get there through small compromises, through weaknesses they allow to stay. Because the training is subtle, the results feel confusing. They wonder why their opportunities seem limited, why pressure unsettles them, why growth feels intimidating. But if you look closely, you'll see the pattern. You'll see the daily repetition. You'll see the habits that shaped your current capacity. Nothing flashy, nothing headline worthy, just steady practice. If you want to know what kind of life you're preparing for, don't look at your dreams. Look at what you repeat. Don't focus on what you say you'll do. Look at what you consistently do without hesitation. That's your real training ground. That's what's shaping your future. And here's the good news. You can change the rehearsal, but you have to see it first. Until you recognize that you're always practicing something, you'll keep training for results you never intentionally chose. Comfort has its place. Rest matters. Recovery is smart. Renewal is necessary. But when comfort becomes constant, it turns into conditioning. And conditioning quietly shapes how big your ambitions are. There's a difference between rest and retreat. Rest is intentional. It has a clear start and finish. You earn it through effort, and you end it on purpose. Retreat is different. It becomes a habit. It shows up before you've really pushed yourself. It stretches longer than it needs to. And if you repeat it often enough, you train yourself to expect ease before effort. When you choose convenience over what's necessary, your standards shift. It might feel small, but it sends a message. My comfort matters more than my growth. Repeat that message often enough, and it becomes your rule. Easy decisions add up. Not in dramatic ways at first, but steadily. One shortcut lowers your expectation a little. That lowered expectation becomes the new normal. Eventually, what once required discipline starts to feel excessive. Your standard drifts downward, not because you failed, but because you preferred easier. Your mind is wired to conserve energy. It naturally looks for the path of least resistance. That's not evil, it's biology. But if you don't manage it, it will always choose comfort over progress. It will pick what feels good over what helps you grow. It will avoid discomfort even when discomfort is exactly what you need. If everything has to feel good before you act, progress slows down. Waiting for the perfect mood, the ideal conditions, or total certainty trains you to move only when there's no resistance. But resistance is normal. It's part of growth. If you require constant ease, you limit what you're willing to experience. Your tolerance for discomfort decides what opportunities you can handle. Bigger opportunities rarely feel easy. They demand more effort, more focus, more responsibility. If you've trained yourself to back off at the first sign of strain, you'll turn down chances that require growth. Not because you lack ability, but because your resilience has been conditioned downward. Overusing comfort does something else too. It quietly lowers ambition. You start preferring stability over stretching yourself. You shrink goals so they don't disrupt your routine. You value safety more than significance. And it doesn't feel dramatic, it feels reasonable. That's the risk. Comfort feels logical. It feels earned. It feels harmless. But when you keep choosing ease, you train for a narrower life. Your nervous system gets used to avoiding intensity. Your expectations shrink to match how much strain you're willing to handle. Healthy recovery makes you stronger. Constant retreat makes you softer. Recovery follows effort and restores what was spent. Retreat replaces effort and prevents growth from happening in the first place. One moment might not look like much, but over time the difference is huge. If you constantly shield yourself from discomfort, discomfort starts feeling more threatening. Things that once felt manageable now feel heavy. Tasks that once required a push now feel unbearable. You didn't weaken by accident. You trained yourself that way. Ambition requires strain. It requires uncertainty. It requires stepping into instability for a while. If you're trained to eliminate instability immediately, you'll unconsciously limit your goals to whatever feels safe inside your comfort zone. Someone who always chooses the convenient option might look busy. They might stay active. But activity isn't the same as growth. Convenience can keep you occupied without stretching you. It can fill your time without increasing your capacity. When convenience becomes your main filter, your standards erode. You negotiate with yourself. You justify partial effort. You accept results that once would have disappointed you, not because you can't do more, but because you've trained yourself to expect less. Comfort works well when it serves recovery. It becomes dangerous when it starts making decisions for you. When it's serving you, it strengthens you. When it's leading you, it shrinks you. And shrinking doesn't usually announce itself as decline. It disguises itself as balance or practicality. This shift is gradual. You don't wake up one morning with smaller ambition. You ease into it. You trim down your goals. You remove the parts that demand sacrifice. You tell yourself you're just being realistic. But realism without courage often turns into quiet resignation. Look at your daily decisions. Do you choose what's necessary or what's pleasant? Do you handle the hard thing first or push it aside for comfort? Do you stretch your limits or protect them? These aren't small choices. They're training sessions. You're either building resilience or practicing retreat. You're either expanding your tolerance for discomfort or lowering it. And that tolerance sets the size of the life you can carry. Your mind adjusts to what you repeatedly accept. If ease becomes the standard, difficulty feels intolerable. If strain becomes part of growth, you'll find you can carry more than you once thought possible. A smaller life often grows out of smaller conditioning, and that conditioning usually starts with one simple preference: choosing comfort when effort is required. Life doesn't only shrink because of comfort. It also shrinks when you avoid responsibility. The size of your world is tied to how much weight you're willing to carry. When you take on more responsibility, your influence grows. When you avoid it, your authority shrinks. Responsibility changes how you see yourself. The moment you say, "That's on me," something shifts inside. You think differently. You act differently. Ownership forces growth because it removes your excuses. When the outcome depends on you, your capacity has to rise. Avoiding responsibility limits your impact. Every time you say, "That's not my problem," you step back from influence. You reduce your involvement. You narrow your reach. It might feel safer in the moment, but over time, it weakens your sense of power. Influence grows when you engage. It shrinks when you withdraw. The more you avoid ownership, the more powerless you feel. That feeling doesn't start with some dramatic failure. It starts with small decisions to step aside, small withdrawals. You tell yourself it's easier not to get involved. But ease without growth leads to stagnation. Competence grows when you accept weight. When you take on something that stretches you, you have to learn. You adapt. You sharpen your skills. If you avoid burden consistently, your strength never develops. Muscles weaken when they aren't used. Skills dull when they aren't challenged. Responsibility doesn't just increase workload, it expands perspective. When you take ownership, you start seeing the bigger picture. You think beyond your own comfort and focus on outcomes. That wider perspective makes your life larger. Leadership starts with self-discipline. Before you can influence others, you have to manage yourself. If you can't keep your own word, if you can't hold your own standards without someone watching, your credibility is limited. Self-command is the base of authority. Without it, responsibility feels overwhelming. Every time you say, someone else will handle it, you practice dependence. Every time you say, I'll take care of it, you practice strength. Those repetitions shape your identity. They decide whether you see yourself as someone who participates or someone who watches from the sidelines. A smaller life often comes from a smaller circle of responsibility. If your concern stops at your own comfort, your impact stays small. But when you extend your concern outward, your influence grows. Responsibility expands your footprint. Avoiding ownership also weakens confidence. Confidence isn't built through comfort. It's built through finishing hard things, through solving problems, through carrying weight and realizing you can. If you keep refusing responsibility, you rob yourself of that proof. Real confidence comes from action. When you take responsibility for results, you gather evidence that you can create change. That evidence builds internal authority. Without it, doubt grows. Doubt thrives in people who haven't tested their strength. Saying, "That's not my problem," feels relieving in the moment. It lightens the load. But repeated often enough, it erodes your authority over your own life. You start feeling like things just happen to you instead of through you. You react instead of lead. Over time, that posture defines your experience. Responsibility feels heavy at first. It stretches you. It demands more than you're used to giving. But weight carried regularly becomes manageable. And with that comes growth. The burdens you once resisted become the very training that increases your capacity. Influence usually doesn't go to people who avoid responsibility. It goes to the ones who step up and take it. When people see you handle pressure without backing down, they start trusting you with more. That trust opens doors. But if you keep stepping aside, those doors don't wait for you. They go to someone else who's willing to carry the weight, not as punishment, just because they showed they could handle it. When you limit your responsibility, you limit your impact. You might feel more comfortable. You might feel less burdened, but your reach stays small. Growth comes from ownership. It comes from stepping forward when it would be easier to step back. Your circle of responsibility can either expand or shrink. If it expands, your identity grows with it. If it shrinks, your influence shrinks too. The choice usually doesn't feel dramatic. It shows up in normal moments. A problem appears. A task needs to be handled. A decision needs leadership. You either take it on or you pass. Over time, those small decisions build a pattern. That pattern shapes how people see you, what you're capable of, and what opportunities come your way. The person who keeps accepting ownership becomes someone who can handle bigger roles. The person who keeps declining it stays in smaller ones. The size of your life isn't determined only by outside circumstances. It's largely shaped by how much weight you're willing to carry. Take on more, and you grow into it. Keep declining, and you slowly shrink around what's left. Responsibility isn't just an obligation. It's expansion. It's the gateway to influence, confidence, and authority. If you train yourself to avoid it, you're training for a smaller life. If you train yourself to embrace it, you're preparing for something bigger than comfort could ever give you. Everyone lives within a personal tolerance level. There's a certain level of behavior you'll accept, a level of performance you'll allow, and a level of mediocrity you'll quietly live with. That level isn't fixed by your circumstances. It's set by what you repeatedly allow. It's defined by what you consistently tolerate. Your life expands or shrinks based on what you're willing to put up with. If you tolerate disorganization, mess becomes normal. If you tolerate unfinished commitments, leaving things incomplete starts to feel familiar. If you tolerate inconsistency, instability becomes expected. Tolerance isn't passive. It shapes you. When mediocrity becomes acceptable, excellence starts to feel extreme. If average is good enough, higher performance feels unnecessary. If lowered standards become routine, discipline feels excessive. Over time, what's extraordinary can seem unreasonable simply because it stands out from what you've gotten used to. Standards don't usually collapse all at once. They drift. One small lapse turns into another. One exception becomes a pattern. You negotiate with yourself and tell yourself it's not a big deal. But repetition turns exceptions into the new normal. The first compromise usually needs justification. The second needs less. The third feels natural. Resistance fades each time. Eventually, what once required an explanation doesn't require one at all. Your threshold has shifted. Every time you debate holding your standard and then give in, you weaken your future decisions. The voice of discipline gets quieter. The voice of convenience gets louder. Decisions become softer, less firm, more flexible in ways that don't help you. Growth requires raising what you consider acceptable. If your baseline is low, growth feels dramatic and unsustainable. If your baseline is high, growth feels like a natural step. The difference isn't talent, it's tolerance. It's what you refuse to live beneath. Many people think they're limited by opportunity. Often they're limited by what they're willing to endure. They tolerate scattered thinking. They tolerate delay. They tolerate excuses. Each tolerated weakness narrows what's possible. When you allow small lapses over and over, you lower your future ceiling. Your ceiling isn't set only by your dreams. It's set by the lowest standard you consistently accept. If you keep lowering the bar, your ceiling lowers with it. You can't live above what you regularly excuse. Think about daily negotiations with yourself. You plan to finish something. Resistance shows up. You bargain. You scale the requirement down. In that moment, you feel relief. But relief that costs you your standards isn't free. It trains you to expect flexibility where firmness is needed. Clear standards make decisions easier. When the rule is firm and consistently upheld, there's no debate. You just act. But when standards are flexible, every action becomes a discussion. That constant debate drains energy and weakens resolve. Your tolerance level shapes your identity. If you see yourself as someone who allows exceptions, you'll behave that way. If you see yourself as someone who protects standards, your posture changes. Identity follows repetition. Repetition follows tolerance. Excellence doesn't just happen. It's guarded. It requires attention. Without protection, standards slide toward comfort. And comfort, left unchecked, resets expectations. Lower expectations eventually define outcomes. Your baseline can rise or fall. It rises when you refuse to tolerate what weakens you. It falls when you repeatedly accept what diminishes you. The shift is subtle. It shows up in daily decisions, small allowances, quiet compromises. When you defend a standard once, you strengthen it. When you defend it repeatedly, you lock it in. That consistency becomes character. Character becomes capacity. Capacity determines how high you can operate without strain. If mediocrity feels normal, excellence will feel harsh. If excellence feels normal, mediocrity will feel unacceptable. The direction depends on what you repeatedly allow. Raising your baseline isn't dramatic, it's deliberate. It means noticing small negotiations and choosing to end them. It means being firm where you used to bend. It means being clear where you used to rationalize. Your future ceiling is shaped by what you tolerate today. If you want a larger life, you have to tolerate less weakness, less inconsistency, less delay, less lowered effort. As you become less tolerant of weakness, you become more capable of strength. Life won't rise above what you consistently permit. It settles at the height of your standards. If you defend them, they lift you. If you relax them, they lower you. The threshold is yours to set. But once you repeat it long enough, it becomes the boundary of your life. If you've been training for a smaller life without realizing it, you can start training for a larger one on purpose. Conditioning works both ways. The same repetition that shrinks you can strengthen you. Training is always happening. The direction is your choice. Facing difficulty builds capacity. When you intentionally step toward things that stretch you, your range expands. The first time feels heavy. The second feels manageable. The third feels familiar. The challenge didn't shrink. You grew. Confidence doesn't come from comfort. It comes from finishing hard things. When you choose difficulty instead of avoiding it, you remove the element of surprise. You train yourself not to retreat at the first sign of resistance. Each completed challenge becomes proof that you're capable. Voluntary discipline changes how you see yourself. When you set structure without someone forcing you to, you prove something internally. You prove that your standards aren't based on your mood. You prove your commitments are solid. That proof builds over time and reshapes your identity. Expansion doesn't require a dramatic overhaul. It requires consistent stretching. A slightly higher standard held every day becomes a much higher standard over time. A slightly heavier burden accepted repeatedly becomes real strength. Small increases, repeated often, create major change. If you want a larger life, you have to practice at that level now. You can't rehearse small and expect to perform big. The stage you prepare for is the stage you'll recognize when opportunity shows up. If your daily life includes resilience, discipline, and ownership, bigger roles won't intimidate you. Start with awareness. Notice where you've been retreating. Notice where you've been lowering standards. Don't beat yourself up for it. Just see it clearly. Once you see it, you can change it. Then add controlled difficulty. Pick tasks that stretch you just beyond comfort. Finish them fully. Raise the standards slightly. Repeat. The goal isn't burnout, it's growth. Each completed effort raises what feels normal. Use rest intentionally. Rest after effort, not instead of it. Let recovery restore you so you can return to higher demands. That way, comfort supports growth instead of replacing it. It becomes a tool, not an escape. Strengthen self-control. Decide ahead of time what you'll accept and what you won't. Reduce internal debates. Replace negotiation with action. Clear rules make action faster. Faster action builds confidence. Confidence makes you more willing to accept responsibility. Slowly widen your circle of responsibility. Take on tasks that require leadership. Accept ownership where you used to decline it. Carry weight consistently. As you do, you'll realize you're capable of more than you thought. That realization reignites ambition. Protect your standards carefully. Don't allow small declines. Honor small commitments. Being consistent in small areas prepares you for bigger ones. Integrity in minor things builds strength for major challenges. Growth adds up. Expect discomfort. It's not a sign you're off track, it's a sign you're growing. When strain shows up, remember it's part of training. Your nervous system adjusts. Your mind adapts. What feels heavy today becomes manageable through repetition. A larger life isn't handed to you. It's built. It's practiced daily long before it's visible. If you practice courage, you become courageous. If you practice discipline, you become disciplined. Identity follows action. You're not stuck with yesterday's training. You can change the pattern. You can shift the conditioning. You can raise your threshold. But it takes intention. It takes consistency. It takes a willingness to handle short-term discomfort for long-term growth. Capacity grows quietly. You might not notice it day to day, but later, you'll realize you're handling things that once overwhelmed you. That's deliberate training at work. That's expansion in action. If you want a broader, stronger, more influential life, start training for it now. Raise your tolerance for responsibility. Raise your standard for effort. Raise your willingness to face difficulty. Practice at the level you want to live at. You're always rehearsing something. You're always conditioning yourself. The only question is whether that conditioning is shrinking you or strengthening you. Choose growth, train resilience, practice higher standards. Over time, your life will reflect the level you prepared for.